Happy New Year! No? Well, Happy New Year anyway. So, 2019, the year of the carbon tax, the year of the election. Welcome to the year that we will see a brand new government formed in Canada. But first, we've got to get carbon taxes out of the way. So, this video will be all about carbon taxes, and it will all be about what the three major, according to me, parties are planning for carbon taxes in 2019. This is one of the major planks that the fight for the Prime Minister's office will be about. This election is going to be about climate change, whether we like it or not, whether the rhetoric is real, whether the Hadcrut 4 data has been manipulated by the IPCC scientists. Yeah, check out ClimateGate. There is a lot of information with regards to things that have been tried regarding climate change, things that have failed to change people's behavior. Certainly importing a lot of citizens. The plan for Canada is, between 7 and 8 million more between now and 2030 if the Liberals are in charge for the next decade. So that's a lot of people. If you bring those people from low carbon climates, hot climates, to high carbon climates, Canada's a high carbon climate because we have to use oils and electricity, which is created by burning oils and coal and such, nuclear as well, to heat our homes, right? We are a high carbon environment. We are a high carbon country because of our location, because of our geography. We can't choose to change our geography. That doesn't work, right? So we have to, because we don't have any other choice. The sun doesn't shine enough to power and heat our homes during the winter months. So we have to use oil. And because of that necessity, we are a high carbon society. We just are. The United States, Germany, these are all northern places. They're all high carbon societies. So that is our reality, whether we like it or not. And I want to tell you what the three parties are doing about climate change. They want to change it, or they want to have the government intervene and have people change their behavior. And the government is willing to use whatever means necessary. I want to show you where we're at. I'm going to tell you what Justin Trudeau is doing and what you, dear Canadian, fellow Canadian, will be subject to the laws in 2019 regarding carbon taxes and rebates. And then we're going to look at Scheer's plan or lack of plan and Bernier's plan. And he actually has a plan. He just started his party. My goodness. And he's got a plan. So interesting. But the National Post, to start us off, the National Post is reporting Canada further from Paris targets than last year, new projections show. McKenna was adamant that Canada will meet its Paris target of cutting emissions to 30% below 2005 levels by 2030. Yeah, not likely going to happen. You can read this article by yourself, but basically, we're further away from the Paris targets than we were last year, and we are not on track to meet the Paris climate targets, and the carbon tax doesn't change that. Okay, here is October 23rd, Global News reporting. Confused about carbon taxes and rebates? Here's what you need to know. And yeah, here's what you need to know. This is what's going on. Quote, the federal government is imposing a plan because Ontario, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan failed to set up provincially run carbon tax schemes of their own. New Brunswick introduced a tax, but the federal government believes it doesn't meet federal climate change benchmarks. The tax will be on industry and companies, but it's expected the cost will be passed on to consumers via higher electricity and heating bills, along with added driving costs from gas surcharges. They can also be expected to see some increases in consumer goods. The government said 90% of the revenue will be returned to consumers through a rebate available to Canadians on their upcoming 2018 tax return. Trudeau has said every resident will be compensated, quote, for the extra costs. And he's not a liar, right? We totally believe that guy. Potato face Trudeau. Okay. Officials say 70% of the people in those provinces will get back more than they end up paying out as fuel costs rise to include the carbon tax. First off, what is the carbon tax? That means that industrial facilities, those that emit more than 50,000 tons of CO2 equivalent per year, will have to pay a tax on the amount of CO2 they produce starting January 2019. But I found this article, and this is an older article. This is an article published actually a week later, so it's a more up-to-date article. My bad. But it says, New Brunswick Power to dodge major carbon taxes after Ottawa proposes looser rules on coal plants. greenhouse gas bill for Beldun Station could fall to less than $1 per ton after the policy change. So this is what I mean. Our carbon taxes aren't actually going to reduce emissions because the big guys don't have to obey the rules, right? Okay, quote, in a climate policy retreat over the treatment of coal, federal liberals are proposing to loosen emission standards for power plants that burn the fuel, effectively lowering carbon taxes on each ton of greenhouse gas released from the coal-burning stations like New Brunswick's Powers Beldun next year to less than $1. It also undermines federal claims made recently, as last week, that major greenhouse gas polluters like Beldun would pay the most under Canada's new carbon pricing scheme. So that's what we were looking at here, right? And I wanted to tell you that this is not true in an update a week later. So that's a sneaky way to make a big splashy announcement and then gloss over the reality of it, right? So the New Brunswick power plant is quiet because they don't have to abide by the climate change laws, and everything gets more expensive. Pretty wild. Federal Government Minister Catherine McKenna's office explained a federal commitment to ban coal generating stations in 2030 makes heavy carbon taxes on coal unnecessary given the cost it would impose on electricity consumers. Yes, the proposed exemption for coal is so large it will eliminate most of the carbon taxes New Brunswick's biggest greenhouse gas emitter, NB Power, was warned it would be facing just 6 months ago. It would also allow it to continue releasing most of the greenhouse gases it currently produces at its coal-fired generating station in Beldun for free. Okay, so the carbon tax is exempting big players, but the little guy, you and me, and small businesses, no such exemption exists. And Mr. Scheer has been hammering Trudeau on this in the House pretty consistently and very clearly. So that's Mr. Scheer's language, not mine. Back to the article. The second part of the tax will hit fuel companies in April 2019. By 2022, the price on carbon pollution will add 11.6 cents per liter to the cost of gasoline and 13.7 cents per liter of diesel fuel, 12.4 cents per liter of aviation gasoline, and almost 13 cents per liter of aviation turbo fuel. Well, thank goodness I don't use turbo fuel to get to work. Okay, here is the carbon tax rebates. So don't worry, citizen, we're going to give you money directly, okay? In Ontario, the carbon cost is estimated at $244, but they're going to give you back $300. In New Brunswick, it's estimated $202, but they'll give you $248. Manitoba, $232, but they'll give you $336. And Saskatchewan, $403, but they'll give you $598, right? So I don't know quite exactly how you can pay a tax and then get more back from the tax, but maybe their estimates are off. Maybe, just maybe. Back to the article. To offset the costs to the average Canadian, the Liberals have announced those in the affected provinces will be receiving a carbon incentive on their upcoming tax return, which ranges from $128 to $609 depending on the province and the household size. The rebate is not based on income. Every household in the same province has the same rebate available. Okay, and I skip down. If you're wondering how the government can give back more than you're expected to pay, Winter explains that's because small firms and businesses who are also feeling the effects of higher gas and heating costs will not be receiving the rebate. Trudeau has said while 90% of the revenue from carbon tax will go to consumers, the remaining 10% will be handed out to small and medium-sized businesses, schools, hospitals, and other organizations. And I jump down. Quote, to get a wholesale shift to more efficient vehicles and to get industry to shift, it's going to have to raise to $100 or $200 a ton, said Dale Belgin, Executive Director of Canada's Eco-Fiscal Commission, previously told Global News. In other words, he explained that the cost to fill up has to jump substantially if people are going to trade in gas guzzlers. But Winter said that businesses and firms that aren't seeing the rebate could be the first to change behaviors. Quote, but on the part of firms, since they're not getting any sort of rebate or any sort of program that will support them, they have a greater incentive to try to reduce their costs, she explained. Yeah, I wonder how they're going to reduce their costs. Do you think they're going to use expensive new emissions reducing things so they use less emissions so they pay less taxes? Or do you think maybe they'll just fire somebody? Ponder that. Okay, so this is the Globe and Mail explaining what a carbon tax was, and I was going to use that before I used the Global News, but that doesn't really matter. I wanted to show you that BC has had a carbon tax since 2008. They've had from 2008 to 2016, I believe, or 2015 anyway, and they've got numbers on it. And the numbers are that the emissions are unchanged. The carbon tax does nothing. The emissions have not been reducing. They've stayed the same. So, and in fact, I believe they've increased, but essentially, I think they were trying to make the case that mathematically they were, quote, where they started. So here is an article from the Sierra Club BC. It says BC's greenhouse gas emissions have risen in 4 of the last 5 years. And this was released in January 2018. It says the provincial government quietly updated its greenhouse gas inventory on the eve of the December holiday season, showing that emissions were higher in 2015 than in 2010 and have risen in 4 of the last 5 years. The provincial inventory shows that in 2015, emissions were 63.3 million tons of carbon dioxide. This is 1.6% higher than 2014, 4.5% higher than in 2012, and 2.1% lower than the baseline year of 2007. BC's latest emissions data mark years of failure to reduce emissions by more than a token amount, said Sierra Club BC's forest and climate campaigner Jen Whiting. 10 years after the previous government legislated the target to reduce emissions by 33% from 2007 levels by 2020, we are essentially in the same place we started. British Columbia's emissions are now 10% higher than the 1990 levels, contrast to European Union, which has reduced its emissions by 23% over the same period. Okay, so the link is in the description. So my point there is that the carbon taxes don't reduce emissions. Simple. Also, I wanted to point this out because this is worth pointing out. This is cumulative greenhouse gas emissions 1990 to 2011, percent of the world. So these are the emitters. This is how much we're emitting. And when we're talking about reducing emissions, we're only talking about reducing Canada's emissions. So let's pretend Canada was zeroed out. How much impact would we have in the world? Oh, 2%. 2%. The United States has 16%, and China had 15% in 2011. And I had heard that China, since 2011, went crazy and is a third ahead of the United States now. And I thought that can't be true. And it's true, according to Wikipedia. Here's the list of countries by 2014 emissions. So this isn't even up to date to now. We've had 4 more years of emissions data to gather and compare. So China is by far the world's biggest greenhouse gas emissions producer at a whopping 25.9%. United States is below them at 14.75, European Union at 9.33, and the European Union 2 at 7.45. So I guess they're different union blocks. I'm not sure exactly why they're separate, but whatever. And Canada, we're 1.63%, everybody. So even if we zeroed out our emissions, we're a paltry little tiny speck, and we have a ton of trees. So it seems crazy to impact an economy with carbon taxes that are destined to impact absolutely the price of absolutely everything, because food is put on trucks and the truck's fuel is more expensive. With the truck's fuel being more expensive, it costs more for the food to get from place A to place B. At Walmart, the cost of everything is going up to run the store. The cost of lighting, the cost of heating, the cost of everything goes up. And so instead of Walmart saying, well, I guess we'll cut our profits, they make things more expensive. Do you remember how much the price of things in 2012? Even the last 2 years, the price of groceries has been increasing very, very quickly. And this carbon tax is going to directly increase the price of groceries. And that affects everybody. Small business owners are people who do grocery shopping. Big business owners are people who do grocery shopping. But it's going to affect everybody, period. From trucking to people who heat a building or light a building to absolutely everybody. So, and again, it doesn't work. It doesn't affect the emissions. Okay, so Andrew Scheer. Let's move to Andrew Scheer. It's the end of 2018. It's been 246 days since Scheer promised a plan to fight climate change. Still nothing. In that time, we've learned his MPs have trouble saying climate change is influenced by human activity, and Scheer wants to take a step back. So this was tweeted out on December 31st, and we're going to look at that, but we're going to go through the whole history. So this is an article published in April of 2018, way back in April. We were so naive in April, we thought the new NAFTA was going to be a party and quickly agreed upon, and Mr. Scheer would have a climate change plan hammered out over the summer. But I guess the The focus groups didn't come back, and we're still waiting. Okay, so this is CTV News in April. Scheer says his climate plan will meet Paris targets without a carbon tax. Scheer says that his party will find another, yet to be decided, way to combat climate change. Yet to be declared, not decided. Sorry, I misspoke there. Quote, we will be unveiling a very detailed and comprehensive plan because we believe that Canada has to be a part of the solution. We're about a year away from the next election, a little bit more. I guarantee you we will have a comprehensive message to Canadians, Scheer said in an interview with Evan Solomon, host of CTV's Question Period. Asked whether the plan will meet UN targets for combating climate change, otherwise known as the Paris Accord or Paris Agreement, Scheer said, of course. The agreement sets out an international plan to limit global warming to below 2 degrees. I will unveil a plan that reaches the targets that we have already voted in favor of. We will have a meaningful plan to reduce emissions and that will also tackle our major environmental issues. Okay, so that was in April. Fast forward to June, I believe. No, this is October. Andrew Scheer says Canadians will see conservative climate plan very soon. The Tory leader told the CPC he's frustrated the carbon tax has dominated the conversation. As international experts sound the alarm for urgent action on climate change, the federal conservative leader says Canadians should stay tuned to learn how he'd tackle the problem as Prime Minister. And in a remark that the federal environment minister has dubbed hugely ironic, Andrew Scheer is bemoaning that too much of the domestic debate has centered on the carbon tax that his party vociferously opposes. And I jumped down here. Quote, we are going to be coming out with our comprehensive plan to reduce CO2 without imposing a carbon tax that has been shown to raise costs without actually reducing emissions, he said. Scheer and Canadians can expect to see his party's plan very soon. But he chuckled when Cullen pressed if he would release a plan before the end of 2018. Quote, our plan will be unveiled in a way that voters will have the time to go through it and evaluate it, he said, adding his party is focused on holding Liberals to account during the last phase of this parliament. And this is December 22nd, Scheer shifts position on climate plan, won't commit to meeting Paris targets. Andrew Scheer would not commit that his yet-to-be unveiled climate plan will meet Paris targets, despite claiming in the past that it would. What I'm telling you today is our plan will have meaningful reductions, Scheer said in response to questioning on whether his party's environmental plan will meet UN targets for combating climate change, which are known as the Paris targets. He made the comment on an episode of CTV's Question Period airing Sunday. When host Evan Solomon pressed Scheer on the issue, and he specified that he doesn't want Scheer to dodge the question, Scheer's answer did not change. Quote, our plan will be reducing our targets in a meaningful way, said Scheer. The response signals a shift in Scheer's position. During an interview on CTV's Question Period on April 29th, the Conservative leader pledged his yet-to-be-unveiled plan for the environment would reach the Paris targets. Quote, I will unveil a plan that reaches the targets that we have already voted in favor of. We will have a meaningful plan to reduce emissions and that will also tackle other major environmental issues, Scheer said at the time. The comments have since been a sticking point for the Liberals. Environment Minister Catherine McKenna has regularly tweeted updates on the number of days that have passed since Scheer's promise to unveil a plan to meet the Paris targets. Scheer has, however, been active in fighting part of the current government's climate change plan. He has been a part of the vocal resistance against the federal carbon tax alongside Premier from Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Ontario, and New Brunswick. The group has said the carbon tax doesn't constitute a sound environmental plan and instead is a tax grab. I'm going to pause here. This whole resistance thing, the resist in the United States against Trump, this echoes that, and that's really weird. Like, I think that's really strange, and I think they did that on purpose. I think they meant that to echo, because Scheer has already come out hitting Trump, and I didn't pick up on this before, but as soon as I read that resistance thing, it just kind of clicked. Yeah, they did this on purpose, and yuck, I don't like it at all, really. Okay, back to the article. I wanted to point this out, Trudeau's trying to brand the Make Pollution Free Again thing as one of his campaign slogans. I dislike that too. Despite these critiques, Scheer has yet to unveil his own plan. So this was December 22nd. So there is no plan for Scheer, and so far gang violence is the one he's hanging his 2018 hat on. Let's rocket into 2019 with, I don't know, who knows what other plank we're going to be dazzled with next for Mr. Scheer. Okay, so onto Mr. Bernier's plan, and I've got a little video clip to show for Bernier and a quick overview of his plan, because his plan is the simplest and seems to actually work. If you look at the United States and Mexico, they don't have any plan for emissions reduction other than free market and allowing the market to become efficient. And well, that's what happens in Western countries. We are efficient and clean when we do our oil, right, Alberta? And that happens with carbon as well. As we become richer, we're able to purchase more carbon efficient appliances, etc. If you punish people with a tax, they can't invest the money in reducing their carbon footprint because they're worried about keeping their head above water. But if you allow them to use their money in the way they want, maybe they invest in the environment, because we all have a vested interest in the environment. Okay, this is Maxime Bernier's plan by the National Post. Quote, Maxime Bernier believes in climate change but defends argument that CO2 is just food for plants. I believe in climate change, he said. Asked if critics are not taking him literally enough on such statements, Bernier said yes. PPC spokesman Martin Mass explains, however, that Bernier doesn't want to proclaim any opinions on its cause. Mr. Bernier recognizes that CO2 can have an effect on climate change. He also recognizes that the majority of scientists believe that human activity is already having a negative impact on climate change, although a minority still believe that this is not the case. As a non-scientist, he does not have an opinion on this, Mass said in a statement. Quote, the PPC's focus is not on debating the science, but on the measures that should be taken to lower the consumption of carbon energy. No government policy that is now being debated, certainly not the government's carbon tax, is likely to have any effect on global climate change. In the interview, Bernier said he would propose no specific climate policy as part of the platform for his new party, which has yet to be formally registered. It is registered now. He says his broader economic policies, including flat, lower tax rate for business, would allow the private sector to find solutions. Okay, and he's fleshed that out a little bit here. I'm going to play you the first minute, and then I'm going to jump ahead a minute to show you two aspects of this interview. This person doesn't understand, and I don't know her name off the top of my head, and I'm not going to look it up right now, but she doesn't understand that Canada's 1.63 or 1.82% of emissions. And her argument is coming from a place like we were China, or like we had the emissions of the United States, and we really needed to turn the screws. And the reality is the United States is reducing its emissions. So the moral outrage here is misplaced, madam. And it's interesting. I think Bernier handles the questions well, and I think he outlines his plan effectively, and outlines the fact that the Liberals' plan does nothing. And I also want to point out, when Bernier attacks the government, he's attacking the Liberals, right? I'm not sure that's obvious, but people have criticized him for not attacking Trudeau enough. And every time he talks about their failed policies, he's attacking Trudeau. So anyway, here we go.
Trudeau government, they're doing right now, it's a little bit hypocrite, because all the experts are saying that imposing $20 a ton, you won't stop emission in Canada. You need to impose a tax of $500 a ton. So they won't change anything. All the experts are saying that. But the Trudeau government is saying to Canadians, yes, we will achieve our goal with the Paris Accord, and we'll do our part. But that's not true. So why signing an agreement when in fact you're putting your action and things that you won't be able to achieve your own goals? So,
but is that true of the rest of the world? Because there's a lot of countries that signed that agreement,
yeah.
Right? Even our provinces agreed to those targets.
But if they agree, but that's why I'm saying climate change, it is a shared jurisdiction with provinces. There's a lot of tax and program at the provincial level to fight the greenhouse gases, and so why the federal government will have to impose another one? We have a carbon tax in Canada right now. It's the gas tax. We have a tax when you go and you're taking some gas for your car, you're paying maybe around 20-25% of taxes. That's a carbon tax. We have one in Canada.
Okay, and I'm going to leave him there for the minute, and I'm going to fast forward. Notice how much better his English is now. This was November. So yeah, his English has really, really improved. Okay, I'll be right back. Okay, and last question, last part of the plan he outlines here.
No, for sure.
And would you have targets to meet? Like, would you want to reduce GHG emissions? Would
I'll let provinces, like you said, provinces, they have some target right now, and I'll let provinces to deal with that.
So there wouldn't be a national target.
But me, at the federal level, what I'll do, I will have in place the best economic environment for the private sector, less regulation, lower taxes, more competition. The private sector will find solution to that. You know, that's not the government who invited the electric cars. That's not a government, that's not a bureaucrat who did that. We need new technology to fight climate change, and that will come from the private sector. So I will do everything to be sure that the private sector will be in competition and they will find a solution. But also the population, people are asking for that. So if you're a private enterprise or private business, you want to please your consumers and you want to grow your share of the market. So business people, they have an incentive to have the best technology. And so that would be what I'll do at the federal level. And I'll let provinces with their program do what they're doing.
So you would.
So I think that for me, Maxime's plan seems to be the most straightforward and the most realistic and the most in existence, Mr. Scheer. Mr. Scheer's had a year and he hasn't got a plan out. Mr. Bernier hit the ground running and said, here's my climate policy. Oh, and by the way, it works better than any other climate policy proposed currently. I don't know. Like this seems to me to be a no-brainer. We've got a conservative party that seems lost in the details, waiting for the focus groups to come back. We've got a liberal party who is essentially goose-stepping into power and trying to do everything they can to maintain it, including stacking the election deck rules. And we've got somebody who's, in my opinion, a patriotic Canadian who's trying to govern the country correctly and is being maligned by a media that was purchased by our current prime minister. So, interesting 2019. I think this is going to be one of the biggest conversations that'll be dominating the news because I think Trudeau thinks he wins on this conversation because he's, in his world, successfully rebranded carbon as pollution, and his, pollution isn't free, or make pollution free again, or whatever his little campaign slogan is. It tells me he's overconfident with it, but I just don't think I think the emperor is not wearing any clothes with regards to this climate change thing, and I think people are going to drop it fast. Okay, well, thanks for watching. Welcome to 2019, and yeah, it's going to be a fun one.